So there we have it. The end of season 2 of the PR Hub podcast has finished, John.
Yeah, it's all done, dusted. 16 episodes recorded.
Over 881 minutes of wonderful, insightful learning from our wonderful guests.
And that was after we edited it as well.
And that was after we edited it.
20 inspiring guests, a perfect 50-50 gender split as well.
And a really nice mix of guests from across the spectrum. We had a range of well-known agencies join us, so big agency leaders, but also dynamic new startup agencies.
Absolutely. National brands, retailers, technologists, creating a new rule book for communications.
We had 3 young guns join us from the 30 under 30, a few old hats and countless fresh ideas.
A couple of them are on this episode, in fact.
A couple of them are on this episode.
We also had 2 presidential nominees.
We had 2 fantastic people talking about mental health. And then today we had 1 roundtable of extremely learned guests.
Brilliant. What a roundtable. Absolutely phenomenal. And just the right amount of swearing as well.
Just the right amount of
One
fucking
C-bomb.
swearing.
One C-bomb.
One C-bomb.
Thank you very much, Rich Leigh. Brilliant.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening. We really hope you enjoy this roundtable. We had a whole heap of fun creating season 2, and we very much hope you'll join us for season 3. But thank you and enjoy. What we want to do first is just quickly go round, because we realise that we have met all of you, but not all of you have met all of you. So we don't want long-winded and deep introductions, but it would be wonderful because some of you may not know each other. Hopefully those that do know each other like each other. It's a bit of a gamble.
I prefer it if they didn't.
John and I really can't stand each other, but we move on.
Can't stand
so what we're going to do, we'll go round in the screen order that I can see that might not be the same order as you can see, so keep you on the edge of your seat. Carrie, go first. Tell everyone who you are if they do not know you already.
Sure. Carrie Rose, founder of Rise at 7. I live and breathe digital PR and links.
Brilliant, but not between Christmas and New Year when you fuck off and just leave the internet quiet.
Yeah, to Aruba.
I'm going, and that's no links are built between Christmas and New Year.
Carrie, you brought a drink.
Was that to Aruba or Anuba?
Aruba.
Okay, fair enough.
Carrie, what
Just
are you drinking? What have you brought with you?
Gin. I don't know. To be honest, I think it might be some sort of Aldi Lidl kind of thing, but it's like an orange gin. I'm running out, so I'll click my fingers for my assistant.
Good idea. Good idea.
Wonderful. Mr. Brown.
John Brown, I head up Don't Cry Wolf. I'm 17 and a half stone. I've been on a diet for 14 years.
And how's that working out today? I mean, Christmas is not a good time.
I just had a KFC.
So really well. Really well.
I just had a Kentucky.
Wow.
A zinger meal box.
About Kentucky. We'll come to that, I'm sure.
We're going to have our first fight.
It's too late for it now. It's consumed. I've had it. A zinger box meal, if anyone's interested, with 2 hot wings on the side.
Nice. We'll happily accept sponsorship from any fast food chain. That's fine. That's brilliant. Thanks, John. We're delighted to have you with us.
What are you drinking?
What are you drinking?
I'm drinking. It goes really well with KFC. A Glendronach 18-year-old single malt. It's very nice. It's very nice. So the Zinger burger, it just lives.
Does it have a serving suggestion on the back? Does it? It goes well.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It says popcorn chicken.
Nice. Brilliant. Alex, no pressure. Can you follow that?
No one can ever follow John Brown. I'm Alex. I'm the founder at Manifest. Pretend to be in charge at Manifest and generally just get involved in taking credit for other people's work. I am drinking an old-fashioned because I am that stereotype. So yeah, you are not a centrist dad unless you are drinking an old-fashioned with a Christmas tree in the background. So
brilliant.
That's me.
That's lovely. It gives the Christmas tree lights make a slightly pale peachy room color as well. Is that the natural color of the wall?
Do you want me to take you around the different colours? Do you want me to? Do you want a tour? Yeah. Last time we had a conversation, you were obsessed with my staircase. Like, you can move in if you want.
Oh my God, the staircase Alex has is stunning. It really is. It's beautiful.
For those people that listen to Alex's podcast, or maybe we didn't include it in, but there's a lovely story, because didn't you go to your house for an Airbnb and ended up buying it?
Yeah. We came.
There and then.
Yeah, I'd never.
That's gangster. Like, you sat in there and you went, "I'm having this."
Yeah, pretty much. We were going away for a weekend for my birthday, not this summer before, and wanted to go somewhere about an hour from Camden, where we were living at the time, so we could leave the kids with my parents. And did that thing, we get a bit drunk on Prosecco at lunchtime and go, oh, what could we get on Rightmove? And the house we were staying in was lovely. And it was up for sale on Rightmove. So I said, oh, can we have a look around? And we did, and we put an offer in. I'd never been to Kent before. So we moved about 3 months later.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And it's got a lovely staircase, which is...
Yeah, I mean, I should say, sorry, can I start again? Alex Myers, founder of Manifest, nicest staircase in communications. There you go. Like, that's how I'm going to be known from now on. Thanks
Brilliant.
to you guys.
Thank you so much, Alex. Rebecca, do you have a nice staircase? Do you want to introduce yourself?
I probably have the dodgiest staircase in communications leading up to my flat. So I'm Rebecca. I'm the head of communications and external affairs at Hybrid Air Vehicles. I actually know nobody else on the call, which is an unusual state of affairs. And I'm from Kentucky. So you're welcome for your chicken.
I've got some of this going on from Kentucky. So
there you go.
I'm going to give you half a point.
Thank you very much.
It's not my
Rebecca, we know each other kind of. Little, we've spoken. So that's harsh. But yeah.
Is there a story there?
No, not at all. No, just
Put on it.
Sorry, I know anyway.
No, just Twitter and
What I do like.
I don't count Twitter knowing. I know everyone on Twitter.
Good job. Yeah.
Exactly. What I will say though is Rebecca has followed in countless other people, spokespeople and politicians and journalists who over the last 9 months decided to camp in front of their bookcase so we can all see what books are behind you.
Well done.
I relocated because I didn't want to show you what was on my shopping list today, unlike last time.
Rebecca, do you have Rich Leigh's book on your bookcase behind you?
Did you know I wrote a book?
No.
Rich, did you write a book?
I did write a book, guys.
It?
I did. You should. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
seriously?
Once upon a time, yeah, man.
If you send me a copy, I'll put it on my bookshelf.
There you go. Yeah, Rich. Send Rebecca a copy, and then there'll be a backup of future Zoom calls.
Yes,
I accept books from all comers.
Yeah.
And what are you drinking tonight, Rebecca?
I'm drinking a South African Chenin Blanc.
Very nice.
I don't know what that is. What is a Chenin Blanc?
It's wine.
Okay, cool. I'll go with that.
White wine.
There you go.
Rick, last but definitely not least, introduce yourself, please.
Rich Leigh, I run Radioactive PR and Radioactive Talent, and I wrote a book once upon a time, apparently.
Available from Amazon and some good bookstores.
Mostly not good bookstores.
Wonderful.
Or in ballot.
In Poland. So yeah.
Yeah.
Literally, it's big in Poland. For those people
Big in Poland.
So wonderful. This is good. We clearly don't need to break the ice because the ice is well and truly broken already, which is great. So it's lovely to have you all on. I'm sure all of you have taken part in an exceptionally boring roundtable in your long and successful careers, and we really don't want it to be like that. So it's a bit festive. It's a bit special. We've got John's Christmas tree in the background, which is lovely, and Alex is
That's piss poor compared to Alex.
I know.
That is rubbish compared to Alex.
It's the owner of a massively successful global network of agencies.
Alex's looks like it's been cut from the gardens of Downton Abbey.
It's literally a Zoom background.
How
bad would it be if I switched this off and I was just in like a windowless room?
Oh, right. Worryingly, we've lost Rebecca, but don't worry. We're going to carry on. It says that her video has been disabled due to internet quality issues. But her video is still being recorded, which is great.
Wow,
so, Rebecca, you can we'll catch you when it all uploads afterwards. So just before we start, just to say, don't hang up at the end because we just need your video and your audio to upload. So that's great. So we're going to start before we get interesting and contentious. We just want to know what campaign you've seen at the end, and when you look back on the whole of 2020, that you've made you really think, shit, I wish I'd thought of that one. That one's really, really good. So hopefully people have thought about this before. If not, think of one on the fly. The only rule is it can't be a campaign that you created, because we're not that sort of show. We'll go around the group, but please comment as we go. If you thought that was really good, say if you thought it was really good. If you thought it was rubbish, then feel free
and by
to
all means jump in as well, because it's a conversation at the end of the day. We're not going to do that was great, John. What did you think, Alex? What did you think? We're not going to do it like that. So jump in. Welcome again, Rebecca. You've jumped back in. This is fantastic.
Brilliant. Carrie, I'm not going to put you on the spot. I'm going to put John on the spot. John.
Yes.
What campaign have you seen this year that made you think, wow, shit, I really wish I'd thought of that one?
Can I have two?
Of course you can. Of course you can. We're here.
It's Christmas.
I quite liked the Patagonia Vote the Arseholes Out work, which they did, just stitching Vote the Arseholes Out into random bits of clothing. I just thought it was super effective and just like an outstanding example of like brand activism at its heart, you know. And I think a lot of brands can learn from the fact that brand activism does mean like picking a side sometimes, and that's what they did very well. And I quite liked what Vans did during the early stages of lockdown, which was to give small businesses a cut of custom vans. So like Slam City Skates could create custom vans on the van store. Vans would make them, ship them out, and they'd get a cut of the profit. So any shuttered small business was able to recreate their brand on pairs of vans and earn cash out of it. And I just thought that was just a lovely show of kind of solidarity, but also, you know, everyone benefited from it. It was a good kind of holistic campaign. So yeah, I enjoyed it.
When was the Vans one?
July, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, July this year. It was just wicked. It's just like, you know, people, a lot of organisations looking to kind of help each other out and stuff. And I thought it was quite a cool thing to do. They were still going strong, still able to produce custom shoes, so opened it up to others to kind of earn a bit of profit off of it.
I love the fact, John, that you're doing a bit of product placement for Patagonia as we speak as well. That's nice.
Mate, I'm literally dripping in the stuff. This is a Patagonia t-shirt as well. I'm wearing Patagonia pants. And, you know, I'd love to work for them.
In case they're listening.
I bought a Patagonia top during their during Black Friday, and you go on their website, it just says, don't fucking buy our stuff because, you know, unless you really need this, don't buy it. And I thought, that's beautiful, but I really do want to buy something.
Yeah. It's good.
Work through the guilt. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. Alex Myers, what do you think?
I think, you know what, this year's been a really good year for campaigns in the sense of remembering what a campaign is. Like, I think so often, like, people think a campaign is just to tell you something rather than to campaign for something. And I think with the various shitstorms that have hit us in 2020, there's been a lot of opportunity for brands to react, and some have and some haven't. But there's been a lot of campaigns that have actually campaigned for something, for some change, which is great. But I think my favorite campaign of the year is basically when people don't sit on the fence and they just fucking tell it how it is. Like, what if there's ever a definition of transforming what brands and consumer relationships look like, it's Ben and Jerry's saying we must dismantle white supremacy. In like, hang on, ice cream is talking about white supremacy, and there's a few people saying should they or shouldn't they, but most of the time people are saying do I agree or do I not. But what I love is that, like, a brand is saying, okay, well, you know, we the people must dismantle white supremacy because, you know, and don't get me wrong, like, there's been a lot of response to the COVID situation where brands have proven a business can make positive impact, but the Black Lives Matter movement, I think, has proven even more so that business can make a more compelling impact on culture than government ever could try to. And I think that statement, just a complete simple written statement from Ben & Jerry's about dismantling white supremacy, what that means, and to come from a brand and not give a shit if anyone goes, hang on, your ice cream, mate. Like, I don't care. It's a bit like when Tetley's went, we don't care, you're racist. You're like, your tea bags are calling you racist now, mate. Like, you've gone too far. Do you know what I mean? Like, I love that brands are able to stand up, not just stand for something, which I think the purpose economy established really well, but stand up for something, which is what I talked about in the podcast when we chatted, guys. But like that idea that there's a push to actually do something, to campaign for something, and not really care if people disagree. I think we've always had a conversation ourselves in the creative process around, you know, it's fine to piss people off, just piss the right people off. Yeah. And it's like, if you're genuinely desperate for that white supremacist pound, then that's your game. But Ben & Jerry's don't give a shit. Yeah. And that for me it wasn't about the bravery. It was just about the brazenness. It was just, we must dismantle white supremacy in our font. Like, that just is undescribably Ben & Jerry's, but also nothing to do with ice cream, was just a wonderful step change for brand communications, I thought.
Wow.
So there.
Wow.
Wordy response.
Two incredible sentiments there. So rich in insight and things. Rebecca, was it Trump 2020?
Oh, totally. Totally. Level. No, it was not Trump 2020, I have to say. I'm actually going to go with something a little bit left field that may or may not be comfortably defined as a campaign. And that's Bernard Looney taking over as CEO of BP. And what he's done to absolutely exemplify their commitment to sustainability goals. He's taken it on the chin because he has absolutely been a target for people who don't believe that BP either should be doing anything relating to sustainability, they're not believable doing anything relating to sustainability. How on earth could they possibly even participate in the conversation? And he's just kind of taking it all and being very transparent in a time when he would have every right not to be transparent. And I think when you look against the others in that sector, in that space, BP are winning as a result. Certainly in the court of public opinion, they seem to be winning. Now, whether they actually do things, you know, it's still early days. We've got to see some real progress, but they have made real progress over the last couple of years as well. So for me, watching him take a pretty strong advocacy stance and have a CEO brand that's really quite powerful and is also growing in 2020 when everybody's, increasing attention on sustainability objectives. And this year in particular has come to the fore. I think that's been quite powerful to see happen. And it's also a really good example of how a CEO can be a really strong advocate. And if it's not embodied by the CEO, then nobody's going to believe it anyway. And he's also been quite open in conversation on social media. His LinkedIn profile is pretty interesting what he does, I think, and he reaches out to employees. And I think that's been great to see from an organization of that size.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for sharing. I think that's really, really valuable. Rich, are you going to say Greg's?
No, I've got a few.
Go for it.
Is it your book, Rich?
Shut up. On the BP one, weren't BP the ones that did the carbon footprint as a effectively carbon footprint as a thing we think about in relation to our carbon footprint? Wasn't it a BP thing like 15 years ago that was basically to put it back on us as a bit of a common strategy to kind of push it back on us? Do you know what? It's not us, massive corporations. It's you guys with you going to Spain once a year. Just I think I learned that recently. So it's good to see BP doing something different. But as a case study, I think they do fantastically well to hide away from their have previously done fantastically well to hide away from their own responsibilities in this. But positively, and thinking this year, I know we spoke about the PS5 stunt. When I spoke to you guys, I did like it. It isn't it's not kind of it's not recreating the wheel in any way. I think it's something that got people outside of our bubble talking, and that's always a good thing. Some of my friends that have no interest in PR, don't know what the hell I do. They're like, "Oh, Rich, was that kind of PR? Was that marketing?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's marketing." And for anybody listening that doesn't know, it was where Sony took over the underground around Oxford Circus. As I say, it's not, and I've seen people slag it off and say, "Oh, it's not especially creative." So what? People are talking about it that aren't you, and give a shit. It's something that it's kind of crossed past just PR marketers. So they've got a lot of time for that. The Specsavers, I love a good reactive stunt, and obviously around the Barnard Castle time, I think I saw somebody. I think it all started with a tweet, and probably they, put the machination in place to get this to this point. But where you could on the pay and display tickets at Barnard Castle. They had, should have gone to Specsavers on the back of that. And I just thought that's fantastic. So on brand, so quick, so clever. So good. And I love, you can just tell that was somebody, that was sat in the bath that morning and thought, fuck, that's a great idea. We absolutely need to do that. So, a lot of time for that. And I'll
do you bath in the morning, Rich?
No, shower in the morning. You know what I mean. Do you know what? I've got a staff member. I've got a staff member who not only has a bath every morning, his mum draws him a bath every morning. So yeah, and he's in his 20s. So I'm not going to say his name because he'd be very upset. But yeah, I might not. But he was in my head as I said it.
Amazing.
Yeah, isn't it?
To be fair.
I know.
Get him on the show. Can we call him up and get him on this podcast?
He's in the bath, John.
It's amazing. The other one that I want to shout out is the Just Park campaign that Ready 10. I think they did the media relations around it. Really, really liked it. I love a campaign like the missing numbers stuff. I love a campaign that has a real world benefit too. And this was early on, maybe not March, but certainly if not, in April. And it was where Just Park asked people to basically give up their car parking spaces if they were near a certain number of hospitals around the UK or any hospital around the UK. And not only did it benefit NHS staff, but it benefited people that no doubt trying to visit family at that time. So I just thought, I can't remember the stats as to how many people that actually, that actually helped. Here it is. So 20,000 car parking spaces were listed for free at more than 280 hospitals as a result, with 800 health workers benefiting. And it was a not-for-profit campaign. I just thought it was a really, really nice way to. It's not super creative, but it doesn't need to be. As to Alex's point, a campaign doesn't need to do anything other than kind of reach its objectives. And this was let's tackle an issue and solve it with good old-fashioned PR. And I've got a lot of time for it.
Yeah, I backed that one because I was actually doing just a piece of research at the time, and it was all around the cost of car parking for NHS workers. And it is ridiculous to pay at hospitals, even when people are having a baby and all that stuff. And I remember I was literally just doing a report, a data report. And then when that came up, fuck yeah, I wish I did that one.
That's exactly that. So your guys' question was, the ones that you wish you'd done or come up with. Yeah. And, something like that it's fantastic. So well done to them.
I'm really impressed that you talked about the Specsavers one, because that message is one that now just resonates with the general public, that they'll reference it when something newsworthy happens. They'll be calling out about Specsavers and stuff. And I think it's interesting because you talk about campaigns in their lifetime, and that's a usable message that can easily be repeated and people get, and it affiliates and things, which is really, really interesting. Carrie, last but definitely not least, what campaign did you see this year that really made you think, wow, I wish I'd thought of that, and why?
Yeah, I struggled on this question. Like Alex said, I feel like this year, despite everything, there's been so much creativity and amazing results. I think I'm going to talk about the Netflix spoiler one. And the reason that it's my favorite is because Netflix didn't do it. And it's because it was like college kids or uni kids or something. Yeah, I love that. I love that even like the Woolworths kid, that these people that are just doing things in their bedroom and then, jumping on brand active. I love it. I love to see it, to be honest. And that Netflix celebrated it as well. I think there's been a lot in the past where, if creatives are using their brand and their assets, sometimes you can get taken to court, but some brands are celebrating creativity now, and I like to see it.
What I also liked about that one was the number of people on Twitter that was saying, oh my God, I can't believe Netflix have done this. And all you needed to do was just zoom in a little bit and see the URL that was something, something ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and it just demonstrated to me, like, people don't take a second to think before they,
people don't even click the link, Rich.
No, I know.
It's just like whatever the headline is, whatever the image is, they're believing it. But
But the same thing happened with the Woolworths one, of course, because they misspelled Woolworths, didn't they?
Yeah.
What I find really interesting is that most of the campaigns you folks cited were advocacy, progressive, socially responsible. Is it a coincidence that those are your favourite campaigns in a year that's basically been like this, when we've all been stuck in the midst of a global pandemic?
We've been in PR too long, and we sold ourselves years ago, and we're looking to claw them back by citing nice things. Maybe that's what it is.
Did you accidentally think that this was a highbrow podcast? Is that right?
Yeah, I think I was the first one to drop a C, wasn't I? So yeah, I definitely was not highbrow. So yeah.
So on that front, why has this year been a creative one? Do you think it's because of the pandemic? Do you think it's the nature of the brands that you work for or see and admire? What's been the sort of accelerator or driver for that this year?
And before people jump in with their answers, what I want to say is what's really interesting. You're quite right, and you're all right by saying it's been really creative in a year when I think 90%, if not every single guest we've had doing the pod, have said, "Joe, we've missed is that sort of serendipity of creativity in our teams, because we're all on Zoom calls and we can't just sort of bounce back ideas, and yet we're still being hyper creative." So I'm just going to jump in there and throw that in there as well.
I mean, I agree. I think we are missing that serendipitous moment in terms of working together as creative teams. But I think I don't know who said it, but someone said something along the lines of like necessity is the mother of all innovation, right? And I think when you've got a crisis, then what you have isn't a bigger opportunity to be creative. You have a bigger opportunity to be decisive. And I think a lot of the issue with creativity isn't actually that it's lacking, it's that people are lacking to say yes to it. Yeah. And I think what we found this year is the biggest question that everyone's had, whether it be about Brexit, whether it be about COVID, whether it be about Black Lives Matter, the question that everyone's asked is, what's the right thing to do? And I think what's been very interesting is the answer to what's the right thing to do is to do the right thing. And I think that suddenly you've had people say, we're just going to do the right thing. And we're not sure if that's commercially right. We're not sure if they've been able to to rise above or go upstream of the tactical day-to-day stuff and just go, well, hang on, our business can't really run. So all that's left is the relationship we have with our customers. Mm-hmm. So let's just do the right thing. And I think we found, therefore, there's been a freedom for decisiveness. There's been we have to do something and no one knows if it's right. And I think one of the biggest movements or progressions that you get in business generally is when people are willing to fail, when they're willing to say, okay, well, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And there's such a fear when there's competition and you're looking around and no one does that in our industry is often a reason to not do something. But for marketers, it's a reason to do it, right? And for, in this situation, this year, it's that unprecedented sort of tag that's been on everything has allowed people to just do unprecedented things. I think it's stuff everyone's always wanted to do, but for some reason, there's just been a bit more license to just go and fucking do it.
I think they've also put it down into two buckets, right? So you really weren't able to get cut through this year unless you were doing something useful for society in some way. If that was taking a stand, setting out your stall, doing what Just Park was doing, or doing something deeply entertaining just to put a smile on people's face. And I think if you were and quickly marketers got to a point where they realized that it had to fall into one of those two brackets. And if it didn't, then you weren't really going to get much cut through. And if it did, you had to make sure it was fucking good, because that was the bar was set then. So you I totally agree with what you're saying, Alex. It was like that necessity piece. They had to do something. And then then the parameters shrunk even further and was like, well, it has to either be like deeply societal and useful in some way or super entertaining. And that then just elevated creative ideas to becoming something quite important, quite powerful this year.
So
I've never seen the volume. Sorry. Sorry, Rich.
Sorry, guys. I was going to say what it also did is, because obviously so many important social issues at play, we'd have clients say, we should be on this, we should be talking about this. And then you think, okay, should we? And then you start, you break it down. And then when there's no good reason to, there's no good creative reason to, because you just be adding to the, to the number of things that are being said about it. You're able to then be consultative and say, guys, let's not. You don't actually. Okay, how many black people are on, or in your company even? And they're there saying, we need to talk about this. It gave us the opportunity then to ensure that other campaigns weren't entering the marketplace almost. That so then it didn't dilute things. The ones that were out there were out there for all the right reasons. Had something to say.
So I'm really keen to hear from John and Rebecca now, because your in-house perspective could well be different from this agency perspective. Rebecca, what's it been like in-house during 2020? Do you feel like actually you've had to lower your volume or increase your volume, or actually not speak at all during this time? What's it been like for you and your sector?
So we can't afford to not speak. That's never an option. We're a disruptor brand in an industry that doesn't get disrupted. Aerospace is about as staid as a sector can be in a lot of senses, because it's dominated by a very small number of very, very big players. So when you're a nobody or a very small somebody, you can't stop projecting yourself into the space, because you just get eaten. But I think what's been really hard in-house is recognizing the challenge of resource. So we're a scale-up business, so resources constrained anyway. We don't have the kind of money that we could spend on a Oxford Circus takeover. That's just never going to be an option for us. Well, I say never right now is that going to be an option for us. Hopefully someday I have that kind of budget at my disposal. But the other thing is we've got an in-house team of people. We furloughed staff. And we've got to be mindful of what we do. If we're seen to be doing too much, but they're not working, there's a very delicate balance there between what needs to be achieved and how you go about achieving it. I think the COVID period has done two things. I was on a discussion this morning about innovation, and one of the speakers said, to innovate, you have to be passionately dispassionate. You have to be passionate about the problem, but dispassionate about the solution. And I think COVID has super amplified that, because we need any solution. It doesn't matter what it is. We've got to find a way to solve this problem. All the regular rules have gone out the window because nobody's playing by them anymore. But the problem is really important and really pressing. So I think that's allowed a degree of freedom in what people are doing that wouldn't normally exist. And I think to Alex's point, but time is really sensitive now. As a business that's trying to grow and create a footprint, we have to take advantage of opportunity as it presents itself. For us, the fact that people weren't flying is a huge opportunity, because we're trying to say that there's a way to do aviation that doesn't put carbon into the atmosphere. So look at how amazing it is that there's no carbon being emitted by all of those flights you're not taking. So there's kind of the inertia of just doing what you've always done goes away when an opportunity presents itself from the chaos. And while I think that doesn't necessarily lend itself to a big kind of blowout campaign, it lends itself to a bunch of small moments of creativity that together combine to, when you look back on the year, you'll have achieved something really dramatic in little tiny bites of really quite creative stuff.
That's really interesting. And I'm keen to sort of lead that into Carrie. So for those that don't know, the PR Hub podcast made Carrie's agency famous, and it's gone from nothing to 50 people, and it's just gone crazy since we appeared on our podcast, which is great. I can't keep up with the success, but Carrie, you've seen a huge degree of growth in your business. You've recruited like crazy. You've opened new offices and stuff. Do you think it's the nature of the type of work that you do that has opened up a new opportunity for brands? Do you think that's why, during this year, they think it's a safer bet to put money into your type of comms?
Yeah, I think so. I think what we saw, and I kind of saw it ahead of this anyway, is that the budgets moved internally. So it went from kind of the brand and traditional comms team to the digital team. So all of a sudden, the SEO guy was just the geek in the corner that put the keywords in the content. All of a sudden, he's got some budget behind him and some budget in his pockets. And that's what we saw change. We have a particular brand that, for an example, has completely died on the high street, completely. They had 100 stores, shut every single one of them. And the only way for them to thrive and survive even is online. And I think with everything that everyone said is, I think brands have become a lot more braver to say yes at the minute. Very similar to what Alex was saying. To being a bit more disruptive or having something to say or saying the right thing. It feels as if, like, I kind of did an analogy. I think it might have been on this podcast actually around.
Probably was.
Yeah, I talked about, I drove past this like car garage and the cars basically had a load of dust on it during COVID. And everyone always said, like, you better keep the lights on. Like right now, you need to keep the lights on. And I think brands try to keep the lights on, but if you're using the money to do that, they're going to go all out. So they said yes to the big things. That's what I've seen. I've seen brands be a lot more braver in saying yes and being different and change as well. I think brands are more open to change in the last year for sure.
I think something interesting about that, Carrie, about bravery, I think what's changed is the perspective on bravery. Like for too long, people have thought new things is brave, when in reality, neutrality is danger. Yeah. And like staying in the middle of the road is just a road traffic accident waiting to happen. Yeah. But like actually, when you look at like the situation now, they can't do what they did last year for a bit less money, which is what 80% of CMOs do to just not get sacked. Right? I just don't want to get sacked, so I'm going to do what I did last year for a bit less money with a bit more polish. Yeah. And suddenly they weren't allowed to do it. And I think I agree. They were looking for different routes and they ended up also looking at budget pots that made them more money. They were looking at the value that comes from different areas. And like you said, from a digital perspective, you can measure the sales impact when you suddenly need to digitize your business, when suddenly like 20% of your business becomes 100% of your business. Yeah. It changes things. And I think massively that's part of that catalyst is just there's no status quo anymore.
Yeah.
And it's and we'll look back, I think, and we'll say, there was an opportunity there that has never risen again in just hitting the reset button and saying, well, there's no such thing as what we did last year.
Yeah. Do you know,
go on, Corey.
When you mentioned that, Alex, around like saving the CMO's job, we've had to do that this year. I'm not mentioning the client, but we started working with a brand and a client who literally called us up and said, I'm going to get fired next week if I don't turn this around. And she said, help me save my job. And that's been interesting for us as a business. Like we've had to help them, people save their jobs in delivering results, et cetera, et cetera. So they've had to make decisions for their own self, but also obviously the jobs and stuff. But I find that real interesting, but also useful for me from Ireland over the last year.
Wow.
Yeah, I was going to say, I kind of did a survey recently, kind of brand marketer survey that was, in no small part for us, as an agency to look at direction, growth and things like that. And I think for a good few years now, we've been, leading the charge and fighting the good fight for, measurement and, been writing for a long time about Google goals, looking at attribution, looking at how does link building impact your visibility, all of these things. But this report showed the majority of people, almost 3/4 of brand marketers, so in-house marketers, of more, and it was only about 100 responses, but good people, everything from startups through to big brands. Ben and Jerry's one of them, funny enough. And 3/4 of them said budgets are going to stay the same or increase in the next quarter. And then we asked in the survey, where are you going to be reducing spend and where are you going to be increasing spend? And almost, they matched in terms of the people that said, yeah, we're going to be increasing spend, said PPC, paid social, SEO and attributable marketing. And the places where they said that they were going to be reducing spend was that traditional kind of press office type work and content marketing, as a smaller part of that. And then, the inverse, the people that said we're going to be reducing spend, it was in the areas that you'd expect it to be. Not one person said that they were going to be reducing spend in PPC or Google Ads or paid social. And that's fascinating. And I think, as you know, to one of the questions you asked us to think about, that's something that we as PR people, as communicators, as marketers need to consider. We need to take a step back and say, okay, we're pretty good at, conveying a message, create a message, crafting it, knowing who the audience is, getting out there. But, it's just the channels that change. And, I think sometimes, attribution has always been there. The ability to measure, or not always, but, certainly for the last 5-10 years, Google Goals is a real thing. And I think I remember once talking to a group of people and kind of going through exactly this, and they said, "Christ, Rich, I'm never going to be geeky enough to care about this." And it's like, well, guess what? A fucking pandemic's happened, and you have to care about this, and it's just exacerbated and almost sped these things along.
I mean, I 100% buy into the idea that, and the fact that we see it and have to measure based on these sorts of metrics. We have to incorporate the kind of the research into what are people searching for, what are the keywords of competitors, etc. However, and this is the one fly in the ointment, I think, for all of this, is yes, they will always say that they're going to increase budgets in these areas, and yes, they'll always want the measurement and the attribution, but there is still something extraordinary about the "fuck me, I'm famous" moment,
of course,
which is the blanket coverage. We are fucking everywhere. The moment where that whoever it is, the CMO, the CEO, she gets home, sits down at a dinner table, and the kids and the husband is talking about the thing that they just saw. I mean, in all honesty, yes, there is obviously all of that underlying, but that is like par for the course.
I think it needs both. It needs the creativity and the measurement, and there's a scale between the two, isn't there? And sometimes you're going to be closer to one than the other, but it's being somewhere on that spectrum, and not running it something.
That's what you're trying to achieve.
Sorry.
That's what you're trying to achieve, doesn't it?
I think from my perspective, so I've obviously came from a search background. SEO has not really been creative, not really. And all of a sudden it's starting to be. I wouldn't say there's many, to be honest. But what has been interesting, I love exactly what you just said, John, is sometimes we focused in SEO too much on the result. And actually, what about making someone feel good? Like, what about, creating a campaign that they go to their boss and go, look what we just did. And even if the results weren't that amazing from a traffic or a Google point of view, look how proud it makes you feel, or because somebody, or your wife goes, you go home and your wife spoke about it. I love that sort of stuff too. And I think, very similar to what Rich said as well, you have to have both, but I love that feeling too. And I think, especially in the search side, they cared too much about the result and not about really how people feel about it, if that makes sense.
I think that's where strategy comes in. I think that's the big opportunity at the moment, is actually, brands are saying, okay, well, what's our strategy? And they don't mean, okay, well, where's our budget split anymore? They're like saying, okay, well, what does our brand stand for? How are we gonna? What are we exactly gonna do that tells a narrative that is compelling from a call to action, involve my product standpoint, but also like, what does the brand stand for? Because at the end of the day, like, the product becomes then a subscription to the brand. People used to say that brands were like a representation of our products, but now they are your product, right? And the products, therefore, are just a way to subscribe to the brand. And the best examples are like the Nikes and the Apples. And it's like, they might be cliches. They're also the most valuable brands in the world for a reason, right? And Patagonia as well, John, as you are clearly sponsored by.
Chuck your affiliate link in the chat.
Yeah. But that idea that, there's a brand strategy that oddly is channel agnostic. It used to be your brand strategy was driven by, I'll pick my ad agency because that's where the biggest budget is. My ad agency will develop the strategy. And then what they'll do is they'll create an integrated program, which is basically, I'm going to tell a PR agency to PR it. And anytime anyone said something was PRable, was talking bullshit as well as destroying the English language. And then and then they'll say, oh, well, we'll make a blog about it, which no one will read. They basically would just...
And that's digital.
It was basically just making advertising the hero. And I think what's happened, not just in the last year, but I guess this year has been a culmination of it, because it's been much more about conversation with consumers than ever before, is that strategy is actually about what is this brand going to do? You know, what's the change that this brand is delivering to the world? Not what's the status quo it's supporting, but what's the change it's delivering to the world? And it has to be a positive impact, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't have to be altruistic. It can be a music festival that makes it the greatest day on earth that you remember, right?
Yeah.
But it has to be a day on earth you remember differently to a different music festival. So it's like suddenly there's a strategy that is not integrated, but unified in the sense of there's not a lead channel. It's like, this is a strategy that is channel agnostic. And then suddenly it's like, okay, now we need experts to produce that. They're like, what that's going to look like, creatives that are going to make that work on SEO, that are going to make that work through PR, that are going to make that work through owned media, but they are not singing from the same hymn sheet. Yeah. Each channel amplifies the other. And that's where the brands are cutting through that aren't not even just the Nikes and the Apples of this world, but actually the new brands that are kind of like strategic natives that have grown up with brands that are strategy first. Yeah. You know, that have grown up with the Nikes, the Patagonias, the Apples, and going, I want to build a brand like that, which isn't defined by what the product is, especially when you look at an app. Like, an app is not going to exist in its current format in 6 months, let alone 6 years' time. So it's like, I need to develop an app that gives some impact, and I will always do what's best to give that impact. And suddenly the strategy becomes more significant. And what's, I think, fantastic for our industry, whether you call it PR, whether you call it comms, whether you call it marketing, doesn't matter where you're coming from. Like, the fact that strategy needs to be a narrative and a story puts communicators at the center of a channel agnostic process, because actually advertisers traditionally have been like, what's going to resonate on TV? And no one gives a fuck anymore. TV is a PR opportunity, right? Yeah. Don't get me wrong, like, TV's massive at setting an agenda still, you know, and it always will be. But let's face it, like, one big ad on the X Factor is better than an actual campaign. And, you know, the John Lewis ad is about PR. It's not about the actual advertising. And like, the strategy needs to be something that is a story that people understand, you know, as a beginning, a middle and an end. But what advertisers have always forgot is it also needs a moral. You know, everyone who watched He-Man knows there's a moral to every story because they told you right at the end in detail. But like, that idea that the moral needs to be there is something that's relatively new in strategic requirement. Like, before it needed to have a call to action, but now it needs to have I don't know, something that makes me feel something.
You're going to have the I imagine, because we maybe all share a similar, I don't know, political leaning, that we're seeing this from this perspective and expecting there to be goodness, a good moral to the story, etc. But one of the things that I think we'll definitely see next year is the sort of the other side of this start to spark up. And Wetherspoons has done a great job of this so far, which is, okay, well, if these guys are going over here and they're talking about, you know, Black Lives Matter, they're focused in on, you know, making sure that we're still united with Europe, whatever it might be, these brands that have made a stand over here, what we're going to say is that we're not going to stop French beer anymore. And yeah, and that starts to show how both sides are starting to kind of lead down this, you know, what is this narrative? What is the story?
But again, it's a narrative that makes people feel something. Absolutely. So it's polar opposite from my examples, for sure. But it's the same, like, strategy, you know, it's still let's center on around what people are going to feel first, which is interesting.
Absolutely. The strategy's there. The strategy's the same for both sides. I think we this year have been used to seeing, and thankfully so, you know, celebrating some of the brands that have really stood for some of the most important moments I think we're going to see in a long while. And in 2021, that partisanship's not going anywhere. Like, that divided society is not going anywhere. If anything, it's probably going to get a little bit bigger first. Vaccine lovers, anti-vaxxers, pro-Brexit, anti-Brexit. That's all going to happen. We will see brands take the other side of this as well and really double down on it. You know, I genuinely believe that Wetherspoons, Dyson, whatever it might have been, has set the tone for what we're going to see is a pretty hefty fight on our hands in next year.
But I don't know whether that's new. I think that polarization is something that is there in culture, and therefore brands reflect
making it clear as a brand, taking a stand for it is where it's new.
That's what we need is polarization. I can't wait.
Bring Rebecca in as well. Sorry, Rebecca, you're going to say.
as the representative of a brand, I have lots of thoughts about this topic, as you might know.
Go for it.
I think this is really interesting to listen to, because I don't often get the opportunity to, well, I do often get to see it on Twitter or on Facebook or in groups, places, what agency people think about what is happening in a brand's mind. And I think where I sit today, and I don't claim to represent all in-house marketing and comms leads by any stretch of the imagination. I actually don't refer to myself as a communicator at all anymore, because it's just too complicated. But I think it's fallen out of fashion to be about delivering shareholder value. My job is to deliver shareholder value and profitability to the business. Nothing else matters. It's all about how I do that. Now, the way I tend to approach that is through narrative, because I think it's the most effective way to do that. I think you use the word unifying, Alex. I think that's a really important word, because coherency across every touch point that somebody has with you builds credibility, it builds trust, especially when you're selling something that costs $50 million. I mean, you can't have somebody not want to buy it at any point in that process, because they just leave. So I think at the moment, it feels really like everybody's talking about how can we make the world a better place. And I think what is going to happen is we're going to have a bit of a backlash when brands realize that they can't monetize that in a way that they need to monetize it for their board to continue saying yes. So I think we'll see a divergence between brands who are able to effectively link feel good factor, feel bad factor, maybe, I mean, whatever you want to call it, that emotional response to a brand narrative. If you can't link that to driving profitability for the business, then it's going to have to go away. And I think some brands have chosen to do it because in this year, it's been the thing to do. And I think that the conversation over the last couple of years has sort of been leading to that point. But the economic outputs or impacts rather from this year, from Brexit, from a number of other things going on in the world, those economic outcomes are going to significantly impact a business's success. So if you can't link the two, I think sometimes when I listen to communicators talking about strategy, that's communication strategy. And I think one of the questions you guys asked was about the most important skill for next year, not to transition us onward, but to me, if you can't link communications strategy to business strategy, you will be left behind. You already have been left behind. It's probably too late for you. Not to be really super negative about it. You can always catch up. But I think, we get caught in our little bubble of comms, and the reality of business, we're taking direction from elsewhere. And unless we engage with that, it's just not going to stay effective.
So I completely agree there, Rebecca, but also I would say that there's a genuine monetary impact. There's a business strategic approach to there, not just being how do we, for example, mitigate our impact on the planet, like you were saying before about your previous examples, but that sort of purpose economy that was outlined maybe 5 years ago around, okay, if we sound like we're good, then generally there's a consumer consensus moving towards us. But from a business strategy, there's now much more belt and braces economic strategy around not necessarily doing good in the sense of being a do-gooder, but in the sense of building your business around something that doesn't openly have a negative impact and positions itself around a positive impact on the lives of the customer, whether that be B2B or whether that be a consumer approach. So if you look at something like ESG or you look at triple bottom line, you need measurable impacts. These are measurable impacts of your planetary values or your values around people affecting your business. And we've seen that massively amplified this year around not just the positive side where, people have been doing good, like Ben and Jerry's, or everyone, all of the woolly liberals like me are sort of leaning towards Ben and Jerry's because of what they said before. You're actually seeing people openly reject brands because they're not doing something to mitigate their planetary pay gap, so to speak, which I've just made up. But these kind of strategic business issues are now not just a reputational one. So you're looking at legislative issues. For example, you're not allowed a petrol car into what is it, 2050 in
20,
the UK?
I think 2040 is the end of diesel, isn't it?
2040, the end of diesel, 2050, the end of petrol cars or whatever. So it's like there's no longer the road has run out, if you know what I mean, for certain behaviors where people were able to turn a blind eye. And actually, it's not just consumer demand, it's governmental demand, it's legislative. And if you don't prime yourself now as a brand for positive impact, then actually that's not a comms reputational issue. You're not talking about the difference between success and significance. You're talking about the difference between survival and success. And I think actually, you know, whether you're an aviation brand, whether you're a fucking shoe company, like you need to be able to talk in positive terms, because if you aren't talking about positive impact, not sustainability. If you look at Scandinavia, like sustainability is a 4-letter word. You know, it's not good enough, you know, as far as they're concerned. That's a base level. Like brands need to provide something that is positive to the world. And that doesn't, as I said, need to necessarily be altruistic, but it is definitely business strategy. And it's not necessarily just comms strategy.
I think there's perhaps a shift in, you know, I agree, Rebecca, what you're saying around the influence of essentially the bottom line. And if there are stakeholders, investors, shareholders who are still expecting returns, everything has to lead towards that. There still has to be a funnel and a flow to that. I think the things that may change potentially with this is activism investors, activism shareholders.
Potentially, I think the thing that makes all of this, difficult to actually take a step back and think, right, okay, yeah, you know, altruism or activist investors. You know, look at the biggest companies in the world. Do they act well? They do not. Amazon, Facebook, Apple. Look at Nike. Even yes, it's all well and good. They have this lovely communication strategy, and they back up Colin Kaepernick because they should, because they've made their living off the back of black athletes for the last few decades. But is it, do they live those ideals? Definitely not. But they're the biggest companies in the world. So it's all well and good us talking about communications as a means to, and as being correlated with business objectives. But I think, Rebecca, I hear you. Like brands, there is a runway. And it's not necessarily the top line, the top percentage of people that will go, do you know what, I love Ben & Jerry's for what they do. My mum's never heard about that. Do you know what I mean? My mum is not going to hear about that. Like none of my family are going to hear about that. It's a small percentage of people that potentially might. And I'm not saying this is negative. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't try to live good ideals again. To a point. We all probably do lean a certain way. So I'm not saying that we don't do that. I just think I can hear people where they, if they got this far listening to us talking about comms and, altruism and doing the right thing, possibly some people are screaming, fuck off, what about Amazon? And it's just...
But again, Amazon's a great example of business strategy. Focus just centrally on your positive impact on the life of your customer. Like I said, they have negative impacts, like completely, but it's not just built around the they know there are certain things that they provide, which is simplicity, speed, efficiency, and just making life easier for their customer. If they suddenly mitigate that with whatever they're doing, if they suddenly impact on that, then their value to the customer depreciates. And a lot of people use Amazon because of all of that positive stuff. But it's much like Uber, right? Uber costs you more money the more you need it. Right. And it's a morally bankrupt organization that's desperately trying to patch on purpose. The reason it's trying to do that is not just from an investment standpoint, but to demonstrate a long-term commercial benefit, because they know, right, that they've managed to get to their position through finance and through owning the media narrative around what they do. Yeah. But that's been purely bullish spend. Now, what happens if someone actually makes it not more expensive the more you need it, and has the same capacity as Uber? Now, that's obviously notional, but there's a behavioral economics book called Misbehaving by David Thaler, who Richard Thaler.
That is on my
Richard Thaler, sorry. He's a current Nobel laureate for economics or whatever, and he says there's still this inherent need for fairness in humanity. that doesn't bear out in a lot of business. And Uber's a prime example where we've sort of forgotten about the fairness because there's not anyone else to compare it to. And as soon as there is, like as soon as someone makes it cheaper, the more you need it, like they can actually access the economics of volume above and beyond what Uber could do. But like, obviously they've created a market leading position for themselves in each market. But the reason they're pasting on purpose isn't actually a reputational thing. It's actually trying to make them more resilient to disruption.
You've
and I think
also
it's
got
interesting.
economic leaders and drivers, right? I mean, they're not going to be doing this if they weren't going to make more money out of it, or if they weren't thinking that their business was going to be morally was going to be physically bankrupt as well. I mean, we're entering a year where we're supposed to be legislating to mandate a triple bottom line reporting structure within every business in the UK. They've just done it in Italy. They haven't mandated it. They've just started putting this into legislation. We've got Green New Deal getting a huge kick up the arse in 2021 with more politics.
Oh dear!
Of actually, a business should be run for more than just its stakeholders, for its shareholders. It should be run for a triple bottom line perspective. Like we aren't going to be able to achieve some of the bigger global impact that we're seeing or that we want to have if business fundamentally doesn't move away from a purely shareholder profit play into a triple bottom line space. And I think you for every Amazon that you've got a Unilever who sees that. You know, and also for every Excel Ventures that you've got BlackRock, an organization with more money than God, shifting its entire portfolio focus to triple bottom line organizations. That's real money, economic money that moves this economy around. And organizations without the foresight to change now are going to be left behind.
So this is a wonderful conversation that we could carry on all night. I sort of get the impression of. Before we move on to my next question, I just want to ask Rebecca, what do you make of those responses? Is that what do you think?
So, I mean, I don't have any argument with them. I think what's a point of frustration for me, I suppose, is that I work at business strategy level. I have to do comm strategy because we're a lean organization, so I have to go in both directions. But I don't think about comm strategy. I actually don't even really love doing comm strategy. But for me, the two things, like I have a group of shareholders. I'm actively seeking investment. I pitch for money as part of my job. So for me, I live that risk analysis loop of, okay, what are the risks and opportunities here all the time of who we are, where we're positioned, what we do. And then as a communicator, part of my job is to influence both within the organization and into our shareholding group to get them to pivot to the thing that's going to be sustainable for the business in that sense, rather than sustainability sense. And I think I see too often that it is downward into the communication out of the business, and it's not upward into the organization itself. So it's really nice to have a brand positioning exercise that sees you, taking a stand on Black Lives Matter, or pick your topic. But a lot of them feel to me like they are brand exercises. They are not organizational change drivers.
100%.
And so to me, like, while I totally agree about the importance of a triple bottom line, the reality of most businesses is they're nowhere near that thinking. They're so far removed from that thinking in their day-to-day practice as an organization that it's a nice ideal, but somebody has to actually go and do the work. So I guess I see a lot of discussion about the importance of the positioning. And it's like, yeah, except it's not going to matter if your 5,000 employees don't care. Those people are the people who are actively adhering to the policy that you've set about whatever the thing is about wastage or improving industrial process. I mean, there are so many links in the chain that have to align to make that kind of thing possible, especially in some heavy industries. Aerospace is a perfect example. This is an industry that is really inherently not good for the environment. I mean, we're a contributor that's larger than most nations to global climate change. So, we've got to do more than just say, oh, look, here's a new concept for an aircraft we'll do in 2050. That feels a bit like a cop out to me. And I think that your point, John, about the governmental alignment is a good one. It will be interesting to see what actually happens, because that too can sometimes be brand positioning, not actual change. Politicians are not immune from that, as we all know. So I think that's kind of where my frustration sits, is actually communicators often don't take the role of driving organizational change, whether it's because they don't want to, or they don't have the opportunity, or whatever. That's a whole different conversation. But the role has to be whole business change. Otherwise, there's not really a point. It'll get you so far, but only so far.
That's brilliant. Thank you.